A baby locks eyes with you, doesn't look away, doesn't blink much, just holds your gaze with an intensity that feels almost deliberate, and something in you shifts. You don't know why, you just know that whatever is happening in that moment, it isn't nothing. Most adults laugh it off, call it cute, move on. But here's what almost nobody stops to consider. That stare is one of the most sophisticated cognitive events happening anywhere in the human species, and the baby is doing it on purpose. Not purpose the way adults intend things, but purpose the way a system built over millions of years of evolution intends things. That gaze has structure, it has function, it has a target. And if you've ever felt genuinely seen by a baby staring at you, that feeling wasn't imaginary. Something real was happening, something measurable. Most people assume babies stare because they're curious, novelty-seeking. The world is new, faces are interesting, and infants haven't yet learned the social rule that extended eye contact is considered uncomfortable. That explanation sounds reasonable. It even sounds scientific. The brain is developing, stimulation is needed, faces provide rich visual information. Clean, simple, believable. But that explanation only holds until you watch what a baby actually does during a stare, because a baby isn't passively absorbing you, it's computing you. Developmental neuroscientists who study infant gaze behavior started noticing something that disrupted this simple curiosity model. Babies don't stare randomly, they stare selectively. They hold eye contact longer with faces that show emotional responsiveness. They orient more consistently toward people who have recently interacted with them, and they stare with measurably different intensity depending on what they're about to need. The gaze, it turns out, is directional, it's targeted, and it changes based on context in ways that pure novelty-seeking cannot explain. What's actually happening involves systems in the infant brain that are far more active than we once assumed. The amygdala, typically associated with threat detection and emotional processing, is functioning in newborns within days of birth. It responds to faces, it responds to emotional tone, and it plays a role in regulating how long an infant maintains visual contact with another person. This isn't a developing system slowly warming up, it's online early, doing real work. At the same time, infants are producing and responding to oxytocin during sustained eye contact. Oxytocin is the neurochemical most associated with bonding, trust, and social recognition. When a caregiver and infant hold mutual gaze, both experience an oxytocin response, both brains shift. The interaction isn't one-directional. The baby isn't just receiving information, it's participating in a biochemical exchange that shapes the relationship. A 2017 study examining synchronized brain activity between parents and infants found that prolonged mutual gaze produced measurable neural coupling. The brains began operating in partial synchrony, brainwave patterns aligned. This phenomenon, sometimes called interpersonal neural synchronization, had previously been documented in adult conversations, but finding it in infant caregiver pairs changed the framing entirely. The baby's stare isn't just social, it's neurologically connecting. This is where it gets strange. Researchers studying infant social cognition began asking a question that sounds almost too simple. What does the baby want when it stares? Not in a philosophical sense, in a functional, behavioral sense. What does prolonged eye contact accomplish for an infant? What does it regulate? What does it predict? What they found was that infant gaze functions in part as a regulatory tool. When an infant stares at a caregiver, it's monitoring, it's reading emotional availability, it's gathering information about whether the environment is safe, whether the caregiver is present, whether a need is about to be met or ignored. The stare isn't just communication, it's environmental scanning. The face in front of the baby is, in the most literal developmental sense, the baby's entire world. The stare is the baby's way of understanding that world in real time. But that's not the deepest layer. Infants are born without a developed prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for rational thought, planning, and emotional regulation. They cannot self-regulate. They cannot interpret their internal states with any precision. What they can do is read faces, and through reading faces, they learn what their internal states mean. A baby feels something uncomfortable, hunger, cold, overstimulation, and it looks at a face. If the face responds with recognition and comfort, the baby's nervous system learns this feeling leads to relief. This is the foundation of what developmental psychologists call co-regulation, and the stare is central to it. The baby isn't just looking at you, the baby is using you as an emotional reference point. John Bowlby's foundational work on attachment described the infant as biologically primed to seek proximity to caregivers. But proximity isn't only physical. Gaze is a form of proximity. Sustained eye contact is an attachment behavior. When a baby stares at you and you look back, something in the infant's threat response system softens, the nervous system down-regulates, the world becomes slightly less uncertain. That interaction, which looks, from the outside, like nothing more than two people looking at each other, is actually one of the earliest experiences of felt security. And here's a reframe that changes how you see this entirely. The baby staring at you is not trying to know you, the baby is trying to know itself through you. Infants don't yet have a stable internal model of who they are or what their experience means. They construct that model gradually through the responses of the people around them. When you look back at a baby with recognition and warmth, you're not just acknowledging it, you're functioning as a mirror. Your face tells the baby something about its own existence. Your responsiveness, or lack of it, shapes the baby's developing sense of whether it is seen, whether it matters, whether the world is responsive to its presence. This is not metaphor, it has neurological grounding. The mirror neuron system, which allows humans to simulate the internal states of others, is active in infants. When a caregiver's face reflects an emotion back toward an infant, the infant's brain simulates that emotional state internally. The outside face becomes an internal experience. Repeated enough times, those internal experiences become templates, early patterns that influence how the person will relate to others, interpret emotional situations, and regulate their own distress for the rest of their life. What looks like a baby simply staring is in fact one of the primary mechanisms through which human identity forms. There's something worth noting here that often gets overlooked. The intensity of an infant's gaze isn't just a sign of interest, it's also a measure of need. Infants in environments where caregivers are emotionally unavailable, depressed, distracted, or physically present but psychologically absent, often show prolonged, searching gaze behavior. They stare longer, they stare harder, not because they're more curious, but because the signal they're sending isn't being received, and the system keeps trying. The stare escalates with unmet need. Which means, in some cases, a baby staring intently isn't communicating connection, it's communicating the absence of it. That's not alarming, it's observational. It simply illustrates that the gaze is a system with a function, and like any system, it responds to the environment it's operating in. What this reveals about human nature more broadly is something that extends well beyond infancy. Humans across the lifespan continue to use the faces of others as emotional calibration tools. Humans seek eye contact when uncertain. People in distress scan the expressions of those around them for signals about how serious the situation is. The instinct to look at another person's face when you don't know how to feel about something, that instinct begins here, in those earliest months when the face of a caregiver was the only available data about what the world was. The baby staring at you is running one of the oldest programs in human cognition, a program that asks, "Are you here? Are you real? Can I trust the information your face is giving me?" And in asking those questions, the baby is doing something quietly extraordinary. It's building a model of reality, one gaze at a time, from the raw material of human responsiveness. The next time a baby holds your gaze longer than feels uncomfortable, consider what it might actually be doing. not seeking novelty, not being cute, but engaging in one of the most foundational acts of human development, trying to locate itself in the world by reading you. That's not a small thing. That's where the mind begins. If this made you see something ordinary in a completely different way, the next video goes even deeper into the hidden logic behind early human behavior and what it reveals about the way the adult brain still works.